All right, I have listed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 European teams. And I want to give you some NBA comparisons based on what we saw from them in Split 1. Where should we start here? Let's start with the Gentlemates. Gentlemates Alpine. So much talent on this roster. Selecao handpicked it. And it reminds me a lot of the Phoenix Suns, who seem like they're in a position here where they're probably going to miss out on the playoffs. It seems like they're probably going to fall out of contention of even a play-in spot unless things change. They're on a losing streak here. Everybody's been talking about how tenuous and strained the relationship in the locker room is. Of course, they secretly were not shopping, but not shopping Kevin Durant before the trade deadline. Bradley Beal has the no trade clause, one of two players in the league with LeBron, so he wasn't going anywhere. Just seems like a really rough spot here. And for a team with a ton of talent and championship caliber players on board, to be bombing out like this is a real bummer. And it seems like, it reminds me of like how Matt Ishbia, the Suns owner, comes in and he puts this whole thing together, and now he's kind of stuck. And Gentlemates are in not an equally, because they do have the flexibility, but in a tough spot here as well. I mean, you handpick this team. What do you do? Like, are you going to move off of Radosin? Are you going to decide that Juicy is the odd man out here? I just really don't know what they do. So Phoenix and Gentlemates Alpine have a lot of similarities, in my opinion. Speaking of another team that now is in a tough spot, Ninjas in Pajamas, they remind me of the New York Knicks, because when you look at the roster on paper, you're like, oh man, Jalen Brunson, Karl Anthony Towns, Mitchell Robinson, he's about to come back. He's almost healthy. Mikal Bridges, Josh Hart, OG Anunoby. They have so much talent on the roster, and the same with Ninjas, but it's like at the end of the day, do I really think that team is going to win a major or win the NBA championship? Not really. Like, I love all the players, don't get me wrong, and I really can't think of how you would change the roster for the better in a lot of ways, but I still have them lower than a lot of teams. So I think that they have some similarities. Geekay here, Golden State Warriors, just because wherever Jimmy Butler goes, Joyo and Jimmy Butler, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the results are. It doesn't matter what the regular season looks like. When it comes to the playoffs or when the moments are really intense, you just don't want to see Jimmy Butler or Joyo on the other side of the pitch. And now that we have, the trade here where Jimmy Butler comes in and him and Draymond have looked great together, you assume that it would have been an issue because Jimmy doesn't necessarily add a lot of shooting, which you kind of felt like they needed it, but just smart plays, backdoor cuts, and they seem to really, really be enjoying playing with one another. I feel the same sentiment about this GK team. Am I going to bet that either of these teams could make it really, really deep into these? No. But am I going to, take the under and say that they won't make it? No, I'm going to completely not bet on them. I don't have all the faith in the world in them, but I definitely am not going to say that they cannot do it. That is for sure. And let me put a little mark on these so I don't double dip, so I know which ones I've already done here. What about Dignitas and the Cleveland Cavaliers, where you respect the players? You're like Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, what a backcourt. Jared Allen, Evan Mobley. You got all these role guys who are really fitting in nicely. Max Strus. And they're crushing it, right? Like, in kind of a surprising way, where you look at the talent and you're like, yeah, they look good, but there's also all these teams that have way more star power and big names on them, Like, when you see Dignitas stacked up next to Karmine Corp and Vitality, you're like, eh. But at the same time, Dignitas have just been winning like gangbusters, and the same goes for the Cavs, who I think, as of recording this, are number one in the East. And it really is tough for me to wrap my head around the idea of them winning the whole thing. Same goes for Dignitas, just for lack of that experience. Of course, apparently Jack has won a major, and Joris is definitely a veteran who's been around for a while. Donovan Mitchell has been in some big series late into the season when he was with the Utah Jazz, for example. And of course, the young talent, if you want to do a Stizzy to Evan Mobley kind of comparison, I feel like they're in similar kind of rungs of the grand scope of things when you think about young talent, where it's really, really exciting, but it's not like the first name out of your mouth. It's not like who's the best young player in the NBA. You're not like, oh, Evan Mobley, or who's the best young talent in the RLCS, Drolly, or a player like that. It takes you a couple to get to Stizzy, even though they definitely have shown the ability. So I think that they're in similar positions where they have surprised with their records and their running their respective conferences. And in some ways, of course, it's not a direct one-to-one because Karmine Corp exists and Vitality and all of that. But I feel like they're pretty close in like the pecking order, at least for me when I'm making my predictions or projections for both of the sports respectively. And let's go a different direction here. We of course have Carmine and Vitality to get to, but what about Startpoint and the Atlanta Hawks? Where you look at the roster, at least I do, and I'm like, oh man, I like all of these players, like a Chronic and Matane, like ooh, and Eugen, like I love Eugen, that really exciting young player, and it's the same for the Hawks, where you go down this roster and it's like they just traded Bogdanovich, but I just watched that Court of Gold documentary on Netflix, and if you guys haven't seen it, you have to go watch it. It was incredible. And for somebody who hated the starting five, I thought it was boring. It was closer to The Last Dance in its excitement than it was starting five. But I walked away from Court of Gold being a really big Bogdanovich fan. Same goes for Trey Young, Jalen Johnson, Dyson Daniels. You just go up and down the roster. Am I crazy? Is Dyson Daniels? I said that with so much confidence, and I'm not going to shy away from it. I'm certain he is because he was a Pelican before. But is Dyson Daniels on that roster? He is, right? He's a Hawk. I'm not crazy. Yeah, he's a Hawk. You just go up and down the roster, and you're like, oh, I like that guy. I like that guy. I like that guy. But at the same time, you know, Startpoint end up what they're seventh or eighth here when it's all said and done for split one, and they just put on Twitter that they're not definitely breaking up, but they are exploring other options. Eugen is going to be somebody who's looked at very heavily here. But yeah, just really exciting players up and down the board, regardless if they're going to win or not. Like if I'm looking at the slate of games on a random Thursday night, and it's like it's Hawks Magic. I'm like, ooh, you know, Hawks Magic, huh? You don't say. Or something Hawks Clippers. I'm interested where I might not be interested otherwise, but it's like, oh, you know, uh Start Point synergy, huh? Like I could get down with that. So I feel like there's a lot of similarities between those two, at least how I look at them. And a lot of similarities as well between Ascend and the Detroit Pistons. I think Ascend probably got more buzz. That team is going to be splitting as well here, but they just do better than you would assume. Like Detroit right now is sixth in the East, which is crazy. I probably would have guessed they were 10th or 11th, but it's like, look at Detroit here, Cade Cunningham is red hot. I think he dropped like 36, 7 and 9 or something the other night. And you could do the same with this Ascend roster. Like people are really excited about Nico. Matt and Juke as well had really great seasons. So, just a lot of young, fun talent on a roster that is doing better than you would have anticipated. Another young roster, Selecao, they've broken up. They're more the Charlotte Hornets or like the Portland Trailblazers or the Utah Jazz, take your pick, than they are the Detroit Pistons, just because Selecao only made one top 16 here, but Rusty's, Mako, and Ever. Rusty's already said, by the way, before I started recording, him and Mozzarella are looking for a third. So that's a strong young French duo right there. But it's kind of like you knew they weren't going to win. So it's like the Hornets where it's like LaMelo Ball dropped 45 again and they still lost by 20, you know. And Brandon Miller's out, which stinks. It makes that team less fun to watch. But, you know, I couldn't help but do a Selecao comparison because any opportunity to talk about Rusty's 95, I'm gonna do it. What about vitality in the Lakers? Probably one of the comparisons I feel the strongest about, not just because they're both wearing highlighter yellow as their colors, but also you are now pairing Monkey Moon, who is in the conversation to be the greatest of all time, with one of the best young players in the world in Zen. And they both have some stuff to figure out here. Neither of them are the favorites, but like defense is definitely going to be a problem for the Lakers, especially when you have LeBron, who's 40, Luka, who can turn it on a little more than I think people give him credit for, but is just not as athletic as a lot of guys. But again, a better defender than he's got credit for. And, like Austin Reeves is on the roster. Just not a lot of guys where you're like lockdown defender. I mean, even Rui, like the best defensive player is Vanderbilt. If he can stay healthy. But if you're gonna get connect minutes, like you're gonna hunt him defensively. Rui is good on ball, but can fall asleep a little bit if he's off ball, backdoor cuts and stuff like that. So defense is going to be a problem, and vitality definitely have some things to figure out as well. But I'm still a huge believer in vitality. Definitely a bigger believer in vitality than I am in the Lakers, even to make it out of the West. Like, Oklahoma City's there, Denver's there. Minnesota have looked way worse than we would have anticipated this season. Memphis is still, floating around. I'm trying to think if I'm forgetting anybody. Golden State, maybe. But I would take the Lakers, I think, over Golden State and over Dallas, to be honest. So they're kind of in that position where it's like, am I really going to be like, there's no way that Luka and LeBron figure it out? I just can't do it. I can't do it. It's not going to happen, but I can't do it. And it's the same with vitality, where it's like, NRG are so strong, and Falcons won FIFA E, and they're so strong, and Karmine Corp are so strong. But it's like, look, like, well, whatever. Like, I still think vitality could do it, and of course, vitality are better than the Lakers, but you guys get my point. What about save the game in the Chicago Bulls? I just had to talk about them because the Bulls are my team. It's really embarrassing, and I'll never give up my fandom just because I can't. I don't believe in giving up the fandom. It's the only sport in which I have a team. Rocket League, I'll never have like a team. I have teams I like more than others. I have teams that I root for more than others, but I'll never have like, oh, I'm a Gentlemates fan, in the same way I'm a Bulls fan. But they trade away Levine, and we are stuck in this pointless, silly limbo of rebuilding around Kobe White and Patrick Williams. I mean, like, what are we even doing? It's just sad. I'm not gonna cry, but it's just like, what's the point? Josh Giddey's fun too. Really, it's kind of like Buzelis time. In the same way that Save the Game is like, let's see what Metzer's got. Like, it's not like anybody's waiting with a bated breath to be like, oh, is Extra and Astral gonna like pop here? It's really kind of like, oh yeah, Metzer is playing with some savvy vets, and it's like Buzelis is getting unlocked around Vucevic, who at one point in time with the Orlando Magic was like the best center in the league. for a moment in time there. And you could say the same for Astral, and of course Extra. I'm sure there's a comparison for him as well. But Bulls and save the game, end up missing the third open, which was a real bummer. They were the only team out of the top 16 to miss it, if I recall correctly. Two left. Let's go 100% in the Houston Rockets, where the offense is great. You know, Houston actually has the most clutch wins in the NBA this season. They've been in 36 games that qualify as clutch, and I don't remember the exact parameters, but I think it's if the game is within like 5 points or 8 points or something like that within the last quarter, or I don't know, last 10 minutes, last 6 minutes, I don't know. But the clutch is like, and 100% here, I got to go back and check. I'm just sitting here like a savage, foaming at the mouth, waiting for Direct to update his spreadsheets, since we don't have Octane GG or Shift anymore here. But coming into Open 3, they had 16 overtime wins, which is just unbelievable. And the Houston Rockets have the most clutch wins here as well. And they're flanked by, who else was up there? I think Denver was up there in the mix with a lot of them. The Hawks, I think, were second, if I recall correctly. So not only the clutch factor, but also players where it's like a lot of rosters where it's like, yeah, I'm glad that guy is succeeding, you know? Like, I think of Louis P next to a player like Fred VanVleet, where it's like, you know, good for like, it's not like I was ever like looking into buying like a Fred VanVleet jersey, and it's not like I was like, guys, you got to go watch Louis P. But knowing what I know about their stories and like where they fit into the wider context of the esport in the scene here, it's like I'm really happy to see them doing well. And there's young players that are exciting as well, right? Like Şengün and Jalen Green could be Rezi and Acro. Or Amin Thompson, of course, is probably a better option than Jalen Green at this point in time. But, you know, young team, really clutch. They don't have the ability to make it. Houston's on a crazy slide right now. I think they're like 3-7 in their last 10 or something. So they're looking to kind of get things together. And 100%, like, you know, that 100% GK matchup where it was like, whoever wins this still has a chance. If 100% beat out GK there is no chance, at least in my eyes, that they would have been able to overcome Dignitas. And even if they overcome Dignitas, no chance they beat Karmine Corp. GK were the only of those two teams who could do that. And I feel the same about Houston, where like, even if they slide in, there's like no chance that Houston are going to be able to win a title. And I don't think that Golden State could do it as well, but they're probably close to that 3% that GK had. They're closer to the 3% than Houston would be, if not higher for Golden State. And finally, Karmine Corp, I went back and forth, and I'm embarrassed to tell you guys how much time I spent going back and forth on something that in the grand scheme of things doesn't matter, but Oklahoma City and Boston. Those are the two, right? Those are the two you have to choose. I think I ended up leaning more towards OKC just because they're the best team. They're winning. They're just beating everybody. You could draw comparisons to Shea and Vatira or Drali, depending on like which way you want to go. Like, you know, he's kind of in between. Like, Drali's too young, Vatira's probably too old relative contextually to where Shea finds himself. But we just saw Karmine Corp really struggle in a high pressure moment, and that's the same worry I have with OKC, who, like, even in something that like wasn't super important, and the same goes for Open 3, like Karmine Corp already locked in the midseason tournament. The Thunder kind of like fell apart. And not like fell apart like completely, but like they did not look like themselves. And like Jalen Williams is your second best option, and he couldn't really get a bucket in some of those big moments late. I can't remember who they dropped out to. were they in the finals? I think I'm getting confused where like it was the Lakers 2 seasons ago, right? And then this year it was the Thunder. And yeah, because last season it was Lakers and Pacers. And then who won it this year? Um, is it the Bucks? I can't even remember who it was. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Um, Although it is going to drive me crazy, and maybe I'll put it up on the screen, or you guys know, and you'll be like, Bel Air, it was. But Karmine Corp are the best team. Oklahoma City on paper the best team, but like this roster hasn't done it yet. And like we talked about the fears that I have around a player like Atau. Of course, it's tough to do this exercise because like Rocket League is only 3 players. If you want to go the other way, because Vatira has done some winning and Drali won a world championship, where the Thunder don't have that same championship pedigree, outside of Caruso, who won one with the Lakers, and that might be it. They've got to have somebody else on the bench who's done it. But you could say they're the Celtics, right? Where it's like, yeah, they're like the best team in the East, and the difference there is that like Boston aren't winning at the same clip. Although I think they've won like 10 out of their last 12 here or something. So they're putting it together a little bit better. But that's another team where Boston is probably the favorites to win it all, but you can make strong arguments for others. So it's a combo, right? Where it's like the Thunder or the Celtics and Karmine Corp are probably a little bit more of a sure thing than either of them against the field. I would say probably closer to Boston if I'm thinking about it. Maybe I think I'm just out on the Thunder, where a lot of people are like totally in and they're like they're gonna make the finals. I just want to see it first. Like I want to see this team of young guys like really prove it before I'm gonna pick them over Jokic, or before I'm gonna pick them over um, you know, the Lakers is not a good example to use here, but I just want to see them win it before I'm going to say that they're going to win it. You know what I mean? I'm happy to be behind the curve on them. That is it for our NBA to European Rocket League team exercise. Very beautiful name. Really excited to see what North America is going to bring here to round out the season.